different practices. Yeah, and I wanted to say that we are also recording this webinar for our files, so this is not going to be shared externally with the world, so you don't have to be afraid of that. People are still coming, still joining. Okay, my name is Dariusz Grzemny. I'm Polish. I come from the Association for Children and Young People Chance, which is located in Poland, and my organization is one of the partner of the Be Inclusive project, which we also announced in the communication with you. And here we have all the partners from the project. We have Indra from Lithuania, Vladi from Bulgaria, Davide from Italy, and Aida from Spain. So these are the organizations that, these people represent actually the organizations that are the partners in the project. And I will start with a little presentation, a little bit reflection on, and also a kind of engagement with you on the impact of COVID on youth work and youth organizations and young people themselves. And then I will share with you different practices that we employed in the organization in order to foster inclusion of young people. And after that, I will ask my colleagues from the partnership to also share other practices if they have anything to share. And then, of course, there will be a moment for questions and answers, and also sharing, if you would like to, from your side, from all the participants. We want to make it a little bit we want to make it inclusive. So everybody has the right to speak up and raise your voice if you have something to share or ask for. So don't be afraid of that. Yes. And please keep your microphones muted if you can for the duration of the presentation. And then when the question and answer session will come up, you can, of course, unmute yourself and ask the questions. Okay, I'm going to start the presentation, and I will ask my colleagues to help me with admitting people in. Okay, I hope you can see this. So as I said, we will try to answer the question in this webinar on how can youth organizations practice inclusion during COVID-19 pandemic on a very practical level. But before we go to the practical level, there is some things to say, because there has been a lot of developments in the past, I would say 1.5 years, or even more, because this pandemic is going on, and it never ends, and the end is still not very clear when it's going to finish. So some of you are probably coming from the countries where your organizations and youth work is more affected than the other ones. In some countries, there is still very strict restrictions related to meeting in person, and in some countries it's a little bit, it loosens up, so it's not that strict. I'm coming from the country where the restrictions are quite strict. We are not allowed to meet with big groups of people, and if we meet anyway, we still have to follow different regulations. So as you can imagine, we do partly youth work online. It's kind of a hybrid youth work, whether we are doing nowadays, and it's probably the case for many of you, that part of the youth work is done online and part of the youth work is still done in person in very small numbers. Up to 10 people we are allowed to meet. So this is something that we practice and try to practice. But before we do it, I would like you to go to the Mentimeter. I cannot see now the code because the Zoom covered the code. Maybe I do it like this. Oh, now it's going to be more visible. If you go to menti.com on your mobile phone or on your computer, and then put the code 10 30 64 51.
The code is also on the chat.
The code is also on the chat. 10306451. Where are you from? So we know who is here. You can put the name of the country, the name of the place where you live, up to you totally. Whatever you prefer to put, just put it there. Okay, there's more people coming. Okay, so we have Lithuania is the biggest, and Portugal, it seems, Italy as well. There's Italy, Sardinia, so there are, somebody was more specific than only Italy. Italy is big, then it's, Lithuanian places in Lithuania, I don't know, the cities or villages, or Romania, Bulgaria, Vietnam, oh, even from outside Europe, that's very nice. Russia, Kenya as well from outside Europe. Things are coming still up. Malaga, Spain. Okay, cool. It's very nice. We have very different countries. Okay. I'm going to move to another slide. And there's also one more question to you. What best describes you? I mean, there is some possibilities you can choose from. I'm a youth worker, I'm a manager. So if you are director of the youth center or whatever, I'm a teacher, a volunteer, a project coordinator, administrator, civil servant, or other, something that you don't feel associated with the previous options. Okay, so we have at the moment equal number of youth workers, project coordinators, and civil servants. That's very nice because we are going to talk about cooperation between different sectors. So I think it's important. Managers, teachers, volunteers are here, administrators, but the youth workers are winning at the moment the chart. So more, it doesn't mean that you don't play other roles as well. It's just what best describes you. So we ask you for self-identification, what you feel the strongest about. Okay. Thank you very much for this. So we know who is here in the room. We have a variety of people with different backgrounds and also from very different countries across Europe and also outside Europe, which is very nice. I think that it's important actually to start with the question, why do we need to understand the impact of COVID-19? And I think that that this is actually the starting point on everything that we do with young people. And understanding the impact, it means understanding the impact on very different levels. So it's not only on the organizational level, which I think is very important, because all in all, if you work in the organization, and this is what we are going to talk about here today, is you are the provider. I mean, your organization or your institution is the provider of youth work. But then there is also the impact on young people who are the beneficiaries of the activities that you are organizing. There is also an impact on personal level. So there is the impact on staff. There is the impact on you personally as well. So there is different kind of levels of impact, which I think is very important to take into account, not only talking about the impact on the organization, only taking into account the impact on young people, because this is not enough, because this is kind of different parts of youth work that are interlinked, and sometimes missing one of the link impacts the whole structure of youth work that is provided. And I think that, I mean, if you look at different studies that has been published, and there have been many studies recently published on the impact of COVID-19 on youth work, on youth organizations, it's, I mean, all of them say basically very simple thing. They say that there is not a single domain of human activity, including youth work, where the COVID-19 would not have an impact. And this impact is, as I said, on different levels, but also there is a different strength of impact. Some organizations, as I said before, were not able, or still are not able to function the way they functioned before COVID. So they had to adapt, they had to change, sometimes strategically changed. It's important to understand it, because it's also, in terms of programming, it's very important, because when you shift to the online environment, when you organize your activities differently, you probably also need different programming. So changing the programs of activities also, which is very much interlinked with the financing of the activities. So you see that this But I think that for me personally, understanding the impact of COVID-19 is important in order to actually do the youth work right, because a lot of things change, but the values of youth work have not changed. There are still the same values. There are still the same basically approaches to youth work, but the techniques, the ways of engaging, this probably changed. So if you are interested in different research and different knowledge on the impact of COVID-19 on the youth sector, on youth work, there is a website of the Council of Europe and European Union Youth Partnership. So if you go to Google and you put Council of Europe, European Union Youth Partnership, they are running, or they have been running for many, many months now, the COVID-19 Knowledge Hub, where you can find a lot of resources related to youth work, especially research. So, and this research covers a lot of aspects, basically very much related to youth work. So you can find a lot of research on participation of young people in the times of COVID. You can find a lot of resources on inclusion of young people in the times of COVID, and any other aspect of youth sector, of youth work. So this is something where you can look up to for very recent resources and research as well, because it's not only research, it's also different resources where you can find information and get yourself updated on how COVID-19 is impacting youth work in Europe. One more question to you on the Menti, and this is the last question on the Menti, and then I will continue. If you can go again to Menti, it's the same code, nothing changed. I'm doing the presentation on the Mentimeter, so you can go there. How was your organization affected by COVID-19? If you can choose the most important one, if you can only choose one. So we needed to change the programs. We lost financing. We limited the scope of activities. We lost young people. We lost staff. We needed to close and other. Okay. So we can see from the Mentimeter that the majority of your organizations limited the scope of activities and also needed to change the programs. So the whole programming needed to be changed, but there is also one organization that needed to close, which is the case as well. And I think the most scary thing is losing young people. And if you go to the COVID-19 Learning Hub on the Youth Partnership, you can see from all the research that disappearing young people, both from education system, but also from youth work, is one of the things that had been identified in a lot of research across Europe. And these young people never came back, actually. In some cases, they came back to education system, but they didn't come back to youth work, which also can mean a lot of things, but I'm coming back to it. So if we can summarize a little bit on what is the impact of COVID-19 on youth organizations, there are these different aspects. Maybe not all of them are covered in the Mentimeter slide, but change of programs. I think change of programming was the biggest part of what happened to youth organizations and any other NGOs as a direct impact of COVID-19. Because a lot of programs, for example, youth exchanges or any other mobility activities, but not only mobility activities, the usual activities of the organizations were very much planned in the residential form. And a lot of them had to be moved online, or sometimes they were not moved online because it was no possibility to move them online. So this is one part. Closure, it's very drastic, but some organizations had to close because this is very much linked with another thing, which is losing financial stability. So a lot of finances were cut because the finances were kind of shifted to another areas that needed more attention. There is mental health and well-being of staff, which had to be addressed. So a lot of people were suffering from not being able to do their work or also suffering because of personal problems. For example, losing family members or having people in the family seriously sick. And there were other staff issues as well, like people leaving or people who needed to be made redundant because as a result of change of programs, some of the programs needed to be cut and certain people simply didn't have work. And it happened to many organizations where they needed to be made redundant. This is one level. I'm going to focus on two levels because otherwise we will need to run this webinar for 3 hours if we go level by level, but this is not the purpose of this webinar. And then the impact of COVID-19 on inclusion of young people. I put, in general, it's on young people, but inclusion is very related to everything that is actually here. So access to services, I think that this is something that is very directly linked to inclusion of young people, and it's very different services, employment services, health services, and so on, especially for people who are living in the rural areas, which became very difficult due to the mobility issues as well. This is one part that affected very much the inclusion of young people. I think mental health and well-being is going to be here very present because this is something that has been highlighted very often in the research, that this is something we thought of actually before COVID. I mean, youth work is something that's kind of aimed at kind of fostering well-being of young people, but we never took it as something as kind of strategical aim. It was something that just happened, that young people feel safe, that young people feel okay when they are taking part in the youth work activities, but now it's a strategical thing. So it's not only about providing youth work, but also linking with other services, because this needs more attention than it needed before. It impacted very much autonomy of young people. So young people were not able to decide on certain things. I remember in Poland, there was this rule when it was implemented last year that young people up to the age of 16 were not allowed to move outdoors without the parents or without guardians, adults, up to the age of 16, which very much limited the autonomy. And autonomy is also related with social contacts. So there was not a lot of possibility of social, and it's still not. And if you observe what's happening in Europe nowadays, this is not getting better. Violence is another issue. This is what a lot of studies show, and also we notice it in our organization, that the occurrences of violence became more, I mean, there are more and more cases reported. I mean, my organization is working with the issue of violence, so we deal very much with the issue of violence on very different levels, and we got much more many cases coming to the organization of violence, and violence on different levels. It was violence online, so a lot of, I mean, young people spent their whole days online, being at school online, and then being online because they wanted to be with their friends as well. But also family violence or domestic violence. I mean, people closed in the same space for 24 hours. This doesn't work in favor sometimes of what's happening on the situation that the young people were in. Employment as well, you probably know it from your situation, where a lot of young people, especially students, for example, when they were studying, they were actually working outside the classes, in the restaurants, wherever they were making out the living, and this has been lost as well. Another thing I think, which is, it's also highlighted very much in the research, is the vilification of young people. So there was a lot of signals on a lot of kind of narrative in the media sometimes, that there's these young people who are to blame for the spread of COVID, because they don't wear masks, they don't want to obey the rules and so on. While actually another research shows that it's quite the opposite, that young people were more kind of obedient than the adults. Digitalization is related with another issues related to inclusion of young people. And it started especially at the beginning of the COVID, where it turned out that a lot of young people not only didn't have the access to equipment, because this is only one part. But this has been sorted in many situations. But I think what's happening still is rather the lack of competences on how to navigate in the digital world. And then all the research shows, and also it comes from the practice, that the groups that were the most vulnerable, they were the most affected. So actually the COVID-19 and all the restrictions that were implemented or that were put in place actually deepened the existing inequalities. And the groups that were the most affected, the vulnerable groups, actually became even more affected. So this is a little bit about the impact. I'm moving. Some of these issues were actually discussed last year in December during the European Youth Work Convention, which is the meeting of youth workers, young people, politicians, or policymakers from all over Europe, several hundreds of people. And last year it was done online. Most of the people were online. Some of them were in Germany. It happened in Germany, where actually on the European Youth Work Convention, several strategical directions of youth work are decided upon. This is more valid for, I'm sorry, I have to drink a little bit. This is more valid for European level rather than for other levels. And you can see that there are several aspects that they have been discussing. They call it signposts for the future of youth work. And you can see them on the left. I'm not going to go deeper into it. If you want to go and read the final declaration and also see the explanation of this signposts for the future of youth work, on how they are explained, you can go to the European Youth Work Convention website. But there are several aspects here that are new, because a lot of them kind of repeat or are a little bit expanded following on the current challenges to youth work and also on the situation of young people. One thing that's very important when it comes to dealing with COVID and also facilitating inclusion of young people in the times of COVID is this signpost, which is beyond the youth work community of practice. So it's basically what has been decided and discussed in the European Youth Work Convention is that youth work sometimes has the tendency to work in silos. So to be just youth work, not really opening up. And here, due to the COVID, it turned out that youth work, in order to be more inclusive, needs to engage with other sectors more strategically. So it's not only on one-off occasions, but also to think strategically what kind of services, what kind of sectors actually needed now in order to do youth work in the times of COVID and in order to facilitate inclusion of young people, which is one of the aims of youth work. And then another one, which is the innovation and emerging challenges. This is basically the part where the impact of COVID was very much discussed. And one of the things that's very important that has been highlighted here is something that I talked already about, is this focus on mental health of young people, and also kind of improving smart youth work or looking at online youth work, because it has been existent, but we didn't talk about it a lot. And now basically in many organizations, it had become one of the main practice. And I put here two quotes actually from the convention declaration. And one is about youth work, that youth work should develop a stage where it can be a safety net for all young people in times of uncertainty. And mental health promotion is seen as a crucial point in youth work. It has never been like this before. It also puts a little bit stress on kind of habilitating or building capacity of youth workers in order for them to be able to promote and maintain the mental health of young people. And then the second part, which is also very important, is about youth policymakers who should engage in constructive dialogue with young people and youth workers. And the second part is very important, in order to create resilient youth work structures, and that are based on long-term thinking and reflexivity, and also which are strategy-based rather than project-based, because in many situations, youth work is still very much project-based, not strategy-based. So this is something that comes from the Youth Work Convention, which I think is important to keep in mind. In the Be Inclusive project, we have been working for a while on creating the framework for indicators for inclusive youth organizations, where we try to collect from our practices different aspects, or looking at different aspects of youth work. And you can see here, we put these 8 aspects of what we thought is important for us, where we can foster, facilitate inclusion of young people. So we developed different indicators. We developed also a guide, a book, where we explain these indicators in details and also give practical examples of how this can be, or how these indicators can be actually realized. This is still work in progress. I would say this is still work in progress, but it's almost finished. It's almost done. It's about putting the final touches. So you will have a chance. I mean, if you follow the profile on Facebook or look at the website of Be Inclusive Project, you also can be informed very quickly when these resources will be available. I'm going to go quickly through these 8, really quickly through these 8 different areas that we thought are important, and then look also on the impact of COVID-19. So the first one is about spaces. It's not only about physical spaces, but also about emotional spaces. So it's different aspects of what we are talking about. So first of all, what we thought one of the indicators that's very important is that to make sure that online spaces that are used for different activities are accessible for all people who want to take part in them. So this is something that's very important. And this can be done in different ways. I mean, this can be done with facilitating the access to equipment or to the internet connection as well in the organization, providing captions or subtitles or sign language interpretation, if it's possible, of course, because this is usually the most expensive part of the work. But also when it comes to emotional spaces, it's about facilitating access to counseling or possibility of being directed to different counseling services. So this is something when we thought is a practical explanation of this area. When it comes to the methodologies and approaches, is taking into consideration the different variety of skills and access to internet and devices as well that young people have. And this is something that's very important, because online youth work is different than youth work in person. And I saw different examples of youth work providers, different organizations that were providing youth work. And they, in order to make this youth work very engaging or motivating for young people, they used very many tools and very many methods. And sometimes using so many tools makes young people anxious and people are lost at certain points. So sometimes it's good to narrow it to very simple tools that are accessible for everybody, and not to throw so many tools on young people at the same time, because this can be actually demotivating. Okay, now it's not moving. Outreach, this is another area. It's more about losing young people online and using young people through online youth work. It's we thought it's very important to use proactive measures to reach young people, especially when it comes to young people from minority groups and marginalized or excluded groups. So using different tools, especially online tools, and not in a very classical form, like putting a post online on Facebook, but reaching out to where young people are. For example, what we did in my organization when we wanted to bring young people to different activities, we also used schools, and schools have this this online platforms, not only for online learning, but also for giving marks and so on, where you can send different messages to young people and also to the parents. So we, for example, made this link with the schools and tried to pass the messages to young people through schooling. And it worked quite well. Sometimes it's also, so this was this kind of additional effort that you have to make, because you need to get an agreement from the school that they are going to promote your activity and so on. Communication, I think it's important, always very important, is the, I think the first part, which is the most important, is that there is a common understanding of the need of being inclusive. No, in the organization, especially among staff, because I remember organizing an activity, and then there was the question, what if somebody comes who is hard of hearing? What do we do? Do we provide the sign language interpretation, or what do we do? And then there were some voices saying, well, maybe they are not coming, you know, so we don't have the problem. But what if they are coming? I mean, there's different ways of using captions, for example. There's a lot of automated captions that can be done through Zoom and other platforms. Okay, policies are as well important. Not going to spend much time on it, but it's just for you to look at. One thing is having a policy, and I think that we thought in the Be Inclusive project that it would be really important for the organization to have a code of conduct or an inclusion policy, which is shared by everybody in the organization, not only by staff, but also the young people, but it's also monitored. So all the activities are regularly monitored if they are compatible with what we are actually promoting. Sometimes it's important, especially in the times of COVID, to put extra financial and logistical, I would say, resources. I don't know if the logistical, you can say logistical resources, but any other resources, not only financial, that are important in order to facilitate inclusion of young people, for example, through online tools. Capacity building, another area. One thing is about being a reflective learner and also a reflective practitioner, which in the times of COVID is very important, not only in the times of COVID, but also in order to do that is about providing supervision or kind of reflection groups or intervision internally within the organization. And also providing the training to staff on how to foster inclusion in an online environment if the youth work is moved online. Partnerships and networking is again coming to what was discussed on the European Youth Work Convention. Is about a cross-sectoral cooperation, which I think it's very important, especially now, because when we talk about mental health, sometimes we do not have a capacity as an organization. We need to consult actually other institutions, other organizations in order to provide support to what we are doing. And the last one is support and resources. And I think that this is also important, that it's providing or developing different resources for how to foster inclusion of young people within the organization, and especially during youth work and youth work online. So this is something that we developed. There are more. I only mentioned several of the indicators. Usually in every area, we provide you with different indicators. Not all of them would actually apply to the online work, for example, but they apply to youth work in general. So it's quite of encompassing different aspects of inclusion on those different 8 actually areas. Now I tell you a little bit on practical level what we did in my organization, and then I will ask my colleagues maybe to share other practices. So these are the different practices that we implemented in different moments of our organizational work. I think at the beginning of the work that when the COVID started and there was a total lockdown and so on, we actually created the intervention phone number. So a phone number where every child or young person could call in case they have problems, in case they are looking for different support, in case they are looking for different services. So we made it available for everybody during different times. So usually it was from 9 o'clock until 6 or 7 in the evening. And this telephone was shared among the different youth workers and also psychologists, because we have some psychologists in the organization. So they were able to provide basically the very first intervention. We are using still this phone nowadays in times where, I mean, today was the first day of school for young people. The schools were closed in Poland until yesterday. So a lot of people were not coming. They were not leaving the homes, or they were not going to the organizations and institutions. So we keep this telephone number still active. We announce it regularly when it's active, when young people can call, and so on. We provided also access to counseling online and offline. We are quite lucky as an organization because we are running a counseling center. So that's because, as I told you, we work with the victims of violence. So we have several therapists and also psychologists. But we also make links with other organizations and institutions that can provide support. So the support is provided online and offline, depending on what young people wish. Some of them can come. If it's one-to-one person, it's possible to meet. And also online, it's also possible within different days. Our practitioners can be consulted. Then what we did, we provided training for staff on using different online tools. So they are able to not only use them, but use them wisely, because using is one thing, but wisely is the second thing. So they are not overdoing things with young people. And also we provided access to different educational resources. We actually published together with Amnesty International, a brochure on how to run educational activities online with different tips on what can be done, how to do it, how to motivate young people during activities online, and so on. We also provided, not nowadays, but we provided access to equipment, and we do it still if young people want to be consulted with somebody who is outside the organization. They want to consult, for example, a therapist. They can come to our organization. We provide the room, we provide the equipment, a computer, where the person can connect with the therapist or psychologist. Because, for example, they want to talk about the situation at home, so they don't want to do it at home, simply. We held regular meetings with young people, online and offline, as I told you before. Very important, setting times in advance, really in advance. So we were making the time, which was a kind of regular timing where we were meeting with young people, especially when it comes to online. We are still meeting online, so this is still, so we meet every Tuesday and Thursday online, so young people can join. We provided support for staff on a regular basis, so we hold supervision of the staff every month, once a month. It's 6 hours meetings for all staff members who are involved in working with young people. And also planning meetings, which we held every month. At the beginning of the month, we talk about what worked, what didn't work, and we plan the activities for the month. It's very short-term planning because the things are changing very quickly, so you need to adapt. What we did, and we haven't done before, we also started to run self-support groups for the most vulnerable groups of young people. Sometimes there are self-support, sometimes there are support groups. For example, the group that we started, it's still at the beginning, but this was the group that we got the indication from many young people, they're very affected, was the young LGBTIQ people. So we started a self-support group for young LGBTIQ young people. And also what we did, and it was also something very new, which is very much related again to this cross-sectoral cooperation. We started networking meetings with other organizations and institutions. We run them online. We run them every 3 months. We meet with different youth and children services, courts, police, even schools. Sometimes some of the schools, different public institutions that are dealing with young people, and so on, and organizations. And we also talk about different challenges that we are meeting, and also try to solve them or look for how we can cooperate in order to facilitate the inclusion of young people in the organizations that and in the institutions that are present in this meeting. So these are some of the things that we implemented. Some of them work quite well, I would say, and I think that some of them were very necessary, especially these networking meetings, because this helped us really, first of all, to build a net of different services for young people and children as well. And second of all, really sort a lot of problems and build relationships with these organizations. So this is all what I wanted to say. I'm going to stop. Sorry, it was very long. So this is these are some of the practices. I would like to ask my colleagues from the project if they would like to share some other practices. I know, Indra, you have one practice to share.
Yes, hi everyone. Pleasure to meet you all here online in this webinar. My name is Indra and I'm the coordinator of this Be Inclusive project. I represent an organization which is called Global Citizens Academy, which is based in Kaunas, Lithuania. And I also wanted just to reflect and share a little bit, what kind of steps, what kind of action we as an organization have taken in order to support the inclusion of young people in these times of COVID, and it is something about advocacy. Actually, our organization, in some ways, deals with advocacy measures, especially more in the educational sector. But we also took some steps, some action to advocate for better inclusion of young people in non-formal education activities, because what was happening at the beginning of last school year, at the end of May, was that the Ministry of Education, together with the national government, they were deciding on the measures on which non-formal educational activities will be provided during the summer period. So what we did, we really tried to put quite a lot of efforts just to prove and show what are the safe ways to include all young people and make sure that as many young people have the possibility to participate in non-formal education activities, namely summer camps during the summer period. Because there was, at the beginning, in some draft strategies, documents, there were quite a huge limitation and some restrictions for people to engage, in those non-formal education activities. So in the end, we managed to prove to the government and to the Ministry of Education that, okay, look, but these are the ways, like organizing the activities in social bubbles and so on and so forth, which are also safe and make sure that you are in a safe place where virus is not spread and so on. So this is something about advocacy. This was very important for us, and we think it worked, and it was really important for us to engage in these processes. And as Derek said, networking, consulting different stakeholders, of youth work, of young people, those who really work for the well-being of young people, it is really, really important.
Thank you, Indra. Anything else to share?
I can go. Yes. My name is Vladi. Hello, everyone. Nice to see a big, nice, full crowd of people, even if only online. I come from Bulgaria and I work with a small organization called Pro-European Network. But we as an organization and me as an individual are very much connected to different movements, networks, and coalitions, particularly around human rights and working with vulnerable groups. So I reflected a bit on not only what we did, but also what other organizations that I'm involved with did in reaction to the pandemic, in attempt to keep engaging with young people in a meaningful way, and particularly young people from disadvantaged communities. And I will give 3 examples, I think, that came to be basically from very specific needs. The first one concerns the Roma community. I don't know how it was in other countries, but in Bulgaria, in the very first months of the pandemic, the Roma community was extra vilified. Darek was previously talking about vilification. The Roma community was extra vilified for spreading the virus or even being the virus, which resulted in some cases in closing Roma neighborhoods, extra limiting people from Roma neighborhood not being able to leave their neighborhood, which of course had its extra negative impact on young people that were stuck not only in their homes but also in their neighborhood and completely unable to socialize and take part in even in physical youth work activities if they were happening, because this lockdown on Roma communities, actually some of them were extended beyond the general lockdown of the population, which actually came to the need for young people to organize and to try to somehow first find other ways to socialize, but also to advocate for changes. And we do have examples. This is mainly through the activities of our partner. It's a non-formal coalition called Roma Standing Conference that we actually serve as a legal entity to. When they needed, they did great organizing efforts of young people that went to meet the mayor and explain why in some cases this extra measures were really limiting, and in some cases, not in all the cases, but in some cases this has actually led to either not allowing full closure of Roma communities or easing it, and in particular for young people. So we, and particularly our partners from Roma Standing Conference, became really active in counteracting some of the impacts of the pandemic on young people. And it came from a very specific need. One more thing they did, and I think it was really important, and we as an organization also promoted their materials very actively, is that they provided information about the new measures, because you might remember, like it seems like ages ago, but in the early months of the pandemic, every day or almost every day there were new rules and new restrictions, and we were always lost on what we can do and what we cannot. And what our partners from Roma Standing Conference did is that they were translating all these rules through videos as well on Roma language and on Turkish, so that they can be accessible for people that might not speak Bulgarian well, which was very needed. That I think the state should have done it, they did not. So we had a great practice there. And again, with engagement of young people, these videos were produced. And I think I will close with one other thing that we realized, like Darek said, that they felt the need to create the self-support group of young LGBTI people. I am also heavily engaged with the LGBTI movement in Bulgaria. One thing we realized is that the pandemic has really big toll on young LGBTI people that turned out to be stuck at home, sometimes in a very unfriendly environment, depending on if they are out to their parents and the dynamics of the relationship that might exist, while queer spaces where they used to feel safe were completely inaccessible physically. So what we really tried to do is of course, organize online activities, but then also organize physical activity as soon as it was possible to meet. I think the young LGBTI people were one of the first that started organizing, and we started doing youth work activities with LGBT young people as soon as the restrictions were eased and allowed for such meetings, because there was really an urgent need. But then one thing we realized is for LGBT young people from the countryside, online meetings actually provided opportunity to get engaged in queer life that they didn't have access before. Because if you are particularly in Bulgaria, in the countryside, there is almost no queer life beyond Sofia. So we realized that online meetings actually gave access and somehow made youth work and LGBTI activities more accessible to young people from the countryside. And this is something that we and our partner LGBT organizations are still doing now. Even if we can do physical meetings, there are still online meetings, so we can also engage young LGBTI people from the countryside. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Vladi. Anything else to add, Davide or Aida?
Yeah, I can say I can share also something. Hello, everyone. My name is Davide. I'm representative of the organization therein 2000, which is based in Italy, and it's also part of the consortium of the Be Inclusive project. I will start saying that I'm not a huge fan of this digital transition. I don't know, maybe someone can say, what are you saying? Okay, of course, I have to admit that there are these tools that gave us the possibility to continue somehow to implement the activities we were supposed to implement and to engage the young people, even the early stage of the pandemic. But as we firmly think that the interaction in our field is one of the most essential part, we tried as much as possible to postpone the things and also to try to find a way to implement them physically. For example, using open spaces where possible instead of staying locked in a room, or try to pay attention to all the rules of distancing and wearing the masks and all the other restrictions that they were set to stop the spreading of the pandemic. So basically, I have to say that also these digital tools, it's something that we were using also in the past before the pandemic, but I can say that this tool cannot substitute what we were doing before. As I was saying before, the interaction is one of the main important part to have a real impact on the youngsters. So as Darek before was talking about the impact, multi-level impact, maybe it's obvious the youth organizations were impacted by the pandemic, but the most negative impact was seen in the youngsters, because even if we managed to implement the activities, I'm convinced the effectiveness could not be the same through the digital activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Davide. Yeah, I think most of the people would agree. Everybody would agree. But on the other hand, I think it's important to take into account what Vladi said, that for many young people, it was actually the chance to get involved, no? Because they didn't have the possibility to come to a city and so on. Aida, anything to add?
Yeah, I was, hi everyone, I am Aida, I'm from Casa Intercultural from Spain. I was listening to your examples, and I think we can identify with what happened in all of the countries, you know, the fact that our direct access to the young people was cut. So because here in Lorca, we also have a lot of minorities, a lot of migrants. So the youngsters that would come to the youth center are youngsters that maybe they don't have another space like that where they can go and you know, escape a little bit from the realities of their homes, and you know, spend some time with friends, do some homeworks, use internet, use you know, laptops or computers or so on. And yeah, with the pandemic, this space kind of disappeared. And we also noticed that with all these changes, from, you know, not being able to meet with your friends, go to school like you could do it before, a lot of young people were in need. You know, they were asking themselves, okay, what do I do now? Like, what, in which direction do I go? How do I continue? How do I move on from this situation with the pandemic and so on? And we had this project at local level. It was a project which the idea was to connect mentors and coaches from Lorca with young people, so that they have a support person to talk about their issues, to talk about their future, to talk about, you know, career, learning options, and so on. So it was a little bit of pairing, you know, and trying to pair the necessities of the young people with the person that can help them, that can be there for them to, you know, just talk, to offer some guidance, to have some support outside of their homes, outside of their formal learning environment. So yeah, I think this was very important to give young people different types of support tools so that they can choose which one fits better for them. So that's for my part.
Thank you, Ayla. Thank you. Yeah, we are almost getting to the end. We only have 5 minutes left, but I'm sorry for this. We were a little bit too long. I was actually too long. Is there any question from you coming or something that you would like to add? I'm talking to everybody now in the room. You can raise your hand before you speak.
Derek, if I just could share one more practice I've just remembered, which I would consider as a successful one in Lithuania, okay? There is an initiative, maybe some of the Lithuanian participants of this webinar know it. This is the initiative which is called I Will Help You to Learn. And this was the initiative that was initiated by a few networks, Lithuanian National Youth Council, the National Network of NGOs that are that are active in the field of education, and I think it was maybe Scouts Union, if I remember well. And what they did, they started, engaging volunteers who support young people that have the learning difficulties, especially while learning online. So they were allowed, and they are still allowed because the initiative is still taking place. So they are allowed either to use the premises in school libraries, or they do it this support classes online. But each volunteer supports individually those who have, some learning difficulties, to explain something, to do the homework together, and so on and so forth. So I think this is one of the successes in Lithuania that really works, and I would actually say that in case you don't have this kind of initiative, it's really worth doing something like this.
Okay, thank you, Indra. There's a question from Davies about could you tell what digital tools are preferred by youth nowadays? I can't say because I'm not young. You should have asked young people. But what we do in our youth work, we try to be as simple as possible. And this works because in the end, I think the biggest problem what pandemic caused is that there is lack of social contact. So what we actually try to put in kind of practice is to actually facilitate the contact. So really talk together. So have a kind of facilitated discussion and so on. And we use simply Zoom for it because this is the simplest for many young people. I've been interviewing a youth worker from Finland who works with digital youth work for many years, and they were actually also talking, but through playing games online. How the games that young people play online, and this is one of the ways. But I think there is not really a clear answer to this because young people like different things, and it's difficult to say. Abdullah, you wanted to ask the question.
Yes, hello everyone. I really enjoyed this discussion and it was really useful. We talked about a lot of issues, which is really important about youth people. I believe that we have, or the youth people themselves have a lot of time to invest, and we really need to provide them something useful to invest that time that they are spending on the phone, on the laptop, or behind the smart screens. So what we really need to do is to put our hands together to try to provide a useful thing that they can enjoy. So for example, now I'm working for a like educational program online platform which try to connect the youth people themselves. So for example, if I have a skill like language skill or programming, designing, whatever, I can open a course over there to try to reach out to those who really need to those courses. So for example, if I know like English language, I can go and open that kind of course and try to reach out to the other youth people, even the like old people, so they can really invest in their times. Before that it was like face-to-face, but now it's online, so we really need to try to do something together. So why we don't do, as I'd said, like, you know, maybe we can work all together, try to collaborate to do something really useful after this great session.
Thank you, Abdullah. Yeah, I mean, partnerships are more than encouraged, I would say. So if you would like to get in touch with people, just, I don't know how to organize it actually, but maybe through the Facebook page. So going to the Facebook of Be Inclusive project, maybe we can, if somebody from my colleagues can post a link on the chat, that would be great. And then maybe here we can, if you are in need of creating partnerships and maybe something together with other participants, that's probably the starting point, because now it will be difficult to share the emails and other stuff. I think this is the best way, no?
Yeah, Derek, and what I could also suggest, if you could subscribe in our website for the newsletter, and this would be also the way for us to collect the contacts of those who are interested, not only in the results of the project Be Inclusive, but as well, you know, in some partnership possibilities. So if you could subscribe, I will post the link to the website here in the chat and just in a second. And this would be also the way to keep in touch.
Okay, thank you, Indra. Okay, I think we will be finishing because it's already 4:02. I know Vladi wanted to take because this is not the end. This is one webinar. We already had one, so this is the second, but the next is coming, and Vladi would like to promote it a bit.
Yes, because I will be in charge of the next webinar. I just wanted for you to see my face and let you know that our next webinar will actually be dedicated to the topic of engaging young Roma people in youth activities and young people from other minorities. But because of our background and the experience that we have as an organization, we will put focus on engaging young Roma. So if this is interesting for you on how can we build successful strategies to engage people from minorities in our youth activities, particularly on the long term, because we will try to be practical in the webinar. But I have to say from now that this type of engagement actually requires a long-term commitment. And we will talk about it. Please make sure to register. The registration is now open. I am sharing the link on the chat to our Facebook page, where we already started promoting our next webinar. Again, that is on the 25th of January. It is the same, it is again Tuesday, and it is the same time. So if you are interested, please make sure to register. And this is another way for all of us to actually keep in touch. And yes, I hope to see you on the 25th of May. Please come. You are muted, Derek.
Yes, I noticed. I'm also posting the Facebook page of the Inclusive Project. So if you are interested, you can go there. Thank you all for participation, and yeah, hopefully to see you soon in the next webinar.